Is the ACC close to a meltdown? Let's talk about that for a minute, because I think this is fascinating. I love, speaking of Texas and Oklahoma, I love the tomfoolery of folks that are telling you, well, look at what Texas and Oklahoma did. They left their conference. That's what Florida State and Clemson are going to do, Marty. Do you guys understand that Florida State and Clemson cannot just up and notice the ACC that they're leaving? We've got to stop comparing, like the ACC yesterday, and I'm not calling anybody out. I'm not going to mention names by names. I love the massive college football blog yesterday that compared the ACC situation to the Pac-12 situation.
Jackass.
And then promptly pulled the blog down because they I'm going to guess got feedback that the ACC has a grant of rights through 2036. The news yesterday out of the ACC was that Florida State was granted permission by a judge to view an unredacted version of the TV broadcast agreement between ESPN and the ACC. And immediately it was, the ACC is melting down. I love, again, Mega College Football blog saying that this week Clemson and Florida State are going to announce they're leaving the ACC. That's a neat little trick. Tell me exactly how that works. Because they don't have a coalition. And if they do, it's one of the best kept secrets in all of college football. They don't have a coalition of 10 ACC teams willing to break the grant of rights. They don't have the ability to just simply walk away. Now, these are also the same people who told you that Florida State was going to play as an independent this season. That was never happening. The ACC, I think, will eventually see seismic changes. That will not be in the next week, and that will not be at ACC Media Day. That timeline simply doesn't work. You have a court process that's playing out. You have a grant of rights that is intact for the next, 12 years. There's no mechanism for Florida State and Clemson to say, yeah, okay, you guys, next year we're out. There's no mechanism for that. Unless they come up with big money, unless they settle their case out of court, unless they find 8 other teams to go with them. There's no mechanism for that. So all of these in the know college football blogs writing that the ACC is going to melt down in the next week without any explanation. And this is always the best part. With no, hey, here's how it's going to happen. It's remarkable to me. But why are they saying this? They're citing the fact that Texas and Oklahoma made their announcement to move to the SEC at Big 12 football media days. Well, why did they do that? Because the grant of rights was coming to an end for them. They had their early exit set up. There was a mechanism, contractually a mechanism allowing them to do that. Why did the Pac-12 melt down? Because their grant of rights was coming to an end. The ACC's grant of rights, say it with me, does not end for another 12 years. There's no mechanism for notice to be given that they are leaving. The only way this happens, that they melt down, is if the court case takes a turn, if they settle, if they find a coalition of teams in the ACC to leave with them. Those are the 3 mechanisms that could trigger an ACC meltdown, and none of them have a timeline that says that's going to happen in the next week. It's simply, I don't believe, is possible. Based on the people that I've spoken to, the documents that I've seen, there's just no way that the ACC melts down in the next week. You know, the worst part of this is, though, I think there are a lot of people who would love for that to happen. And I think when we sit here and we look at Florida State and Clemson specifically, I don't think there's any doubt that Greg Sankey is waiting for a move to be made. I don't think there's any doubt that Brett Yormark is waiting for a move to be made. I actually think Tony Petitti and the Big Ten are in 3rd position to acquire teams in an ACC meltdown scenario. Because 1, they've been very vocal about the fact that they don't want to go to 20 plus. Very vocal about that. And they know, in my opinion, they know that Florida State and Clemson, their first choice is not going to the Big Ten. It is the SEC. I think they know in the Big Ten that if that league melted down, I think they could very quickly add Notre Dame, Duke, and North Carolina. I think they could very quickly do that. So I think Brett Yormark is actually in a very good position. As we've reported, and I believe we had the exclusive on it when we did report it, Brett Yormark has had back channel conversations, according to our sources, with just about every school in the ACC, including Duke and North Carolina.
Facts.
And I think he would love nothing more than to add Duke and North Carolina. I think he would love to add the Virginia schools. I think he would love to add Pitt and Louisville. I think Brett Yormark knows specifically what his options are and who is available to him if and when the ACC melts down. And I think that league is going to see dramatic change. I do not believe, and I have not been told by anybody in the know, that that's going to happen this week. Jake, I just don't think it's a possibility.
Yeah, and I think that, everyone, again, this is the whole, one piece of news comes out and everyone freaks out. One little thing happens in a court proceeding and everyone loses their mind. And it's like, cool, man, you're going to get an unredacted look at the ESPN agreement. The public is not going to get access to that. Those documents have to be returned. So it's a very private situation. And it's going to come down to Florida State, and the story they tell, because that's what this is going to turn into now that they're getting a look. They're going to look at the documents and then they're going to try and spin it and tell a story of, shenanigans behind the scenes. And here's the loophole we're going to try and exploit. And then it's going to go to court and it's going to, turn into, well, actually, there wasn't a loophole. You guys just kind of twisted the story like you have been since the beginning. And so, there's no way for anything to happen this week. There's no way, no how that anything's going to change. And that's what people have to accept, is that not every single realignment situation is the same. The grant of rights being well in place and having this many years left changes the situation. It changes it. You can't leave the conference. So nothing's going to happen this week. And it does get old. I love that. Yeah. College football boards put something up and then take it down 5 minutes later. You want to get clicks, you want to get your attention, and then you take it down 5 minutes later when you realize, we probably shouldn't be saying it. It's like, the reporting on Sunday night that came out that, all these teams are going to leave the conference and they're all going to the Big 12 and Brett Yormark's raiding the ACC. That's not happening, man. Yes. Are there conversations that happen? Yes. But you're not initiating movement. That's just, it's not going to take place. And I think that I think that you, as a college football fan, need to seriously vet the things you read before you decide whether that should be taken as fact or, hey, maybe this is just a conjecture piece.
Well, and I also think this comparison to Florida State and Clemson to Texas and OU is just so off base. It's not close. You have to go and look at why Oklahoma and Texas were able to buy their way out of the conference.
I mean, it totally sells short the strength of the relationships in the two different situations. I mean, Texas and OU had a good relationship with the conference. That's why they could have a conversation about a buyout and leaving a year early. That's why you could do the things you did. And in the ACC, it's contentious. You don't have a great relationship. You're sitting here fighting each other in court over how you can leave or if it's possible to leave or, and again, I just want to point this out, like we've been for a year now or whatever. They've been trying to get out of this grant of rights for how long? And you haven't figured out a way. So
I think you look at the Texas and OU situation. I think Texas did a very wise thing by openly and honestly communicating with Brett Yormark. I think because you look at the way that Texas operated in this conference, they absolutely knew they had the bully pulpit. They absolutely knew that they were a critical piece of the success and failure of the Big 12. and they knew that their financial future was probably tied to generating more revenue. Now, had they stayed, would this be a different situation? Certainly it would. But I think if you're Texas and OU, you did the absolute right thing by leaving. You took your financial future and the viability of your athletic department to greener pastures. And I think any of us would have done the same thing. Now, the way they did it, I don't know about all that. I don't love the vitriol that seemed to always exist. But I think Texas did the exact right thing by being bluntly honest the moment that Brett Yormark came to town. And I that was the only way to operate. And I think Brett Yormark did the exact right thing. He was never going to fight that. He was never, because there's no fighting it or fixing it. There's going and getting the four corner schools. There is expanding, the way they did with Houston, BYU, Cincinnati. Like, I mean, that move to get UCF in this league, I think at some point in the future, UCF will be a critical part of the success of the Big 12.
Mm-hmm.
And I see it that way. I think it's just going to be very interesting to see how the lawyers finally let all this fall through the colander, if you will. The strainer,
right.
I'm very curious to see how all this works out. I'm told that there is nothing shocking or groundbreaking in the agreement between ESPN and the ACC. It is in a lot of people's estimations, there will be a lot of spin to come off that document. I'll be interested to see if Florida State picks something or some things out of the agreement, the broadcast agreement with the ACC and ESPN, that they find, breaches fiduciary responsibility or is negligent. It's highly unlikely that's the case.
Yeah, there's not going to be anything in there that legally is negligent or way out of left field. What Florida State's going to try and do is they're going to try and spin, and they are going to try to find any little ray of sunshine that they can lean on to try to squeeze out of the grant of rights. That's the only reason you want to look at this, because that's the play. Hey, well, if we can't straight up get out of the grant of rights, then let's try to get a full copy of that agreement and pick through it. And that's why I say, like, you're going to see what's going to take place is you'll hear from Florida State at some point in the next week, I'm sure, whenever they get these documents, and they're going to have this whole story to tell. Then you're going to get all the barking dogs in the ACC talking about, oh man, the ACC is melting down. And we'll talk about it next week or whenever all that comes out. And then everyone's going to realize, oh yeah, Florida State wasn't telling the truth. And my suspicion is that Florida State is going to really push it in court. And then at some point it will get put to an end.
I would guess so. I just think that these realignment, and I'll keep going to Texas and Brett Yormark. Brett Yormark walked into a jackpot with Texas and OU. I mean, there's just that was not a good situation. Not certainly ideal when you're the commissioner and you walk into that kind of firefight. He didn't try to beg or plead, or I think he handled it perfectly. And I think Texas, I've always been told that Texas was very blunt and honest with Brett Yormark, and I think he respected that. And I think he handled it perfectly. And could it have gone sideways? I maybe not. Maybe I give Brett Yormark too much credit. But I look at this Florida State Clemson situation. You've openly declared war on your constituents. That never works. That never, ever works. And I think the Big 12 is very fortunate that Texas and OU did not go this route.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that the conference was strong enough to survive that. I don't. And I think Brett getting that TV deal done, after the, it depends on who you believe, who is nudging who. But I think that was really important. Really, really important. So that's where I see it. That's why, as the graphic says, I don't believe that the FSU situation is like Texas and OU. And I don't think that there is anything new outside of a judge granting Florida State a view of an unredacted contract. I think that was the next logical step, in my opinion. Hour number 2 of the Monty Show is always presented by our good friends at Canyons Golf. Park City's destination golf resort. You guys, I'm telling you, it is going to be hot this week. It is wild to me that we are looking at forecasted highs of 107 to some people saying 110 in Utah this week. That's wild.
Cooking.
I haven't looked at it, and the weather here frequently swings wildly. But looking at the Weather Channel app for daily highs, you're looking at 107 on Friday, 108 on Saturday, before we cool off to 101 on Sunday.
Yeah.
It's going to be hot. Escape to Park City. Escape to the mountains. Escape to the cool breezes. Escape with your golf game to some of the most glorious, beautiful tee boxes in the entire country at Park City Mountain Resort Canyons Golf. It is just epic. And the greens are undulating greens, which means they have different levels, and they're tough greens to read, man. That is a tough place to putt, but it is challenging. It is gorgeous, and it is fun golf to play. Lush fairways, beautiful bunkers that Mrs. Monty seems to find every single one on every single hole. But I'm telling you guys, there's no better golf experience, and there's no cooler respite in the state of Utah than heading to Park City. Do a staycation at Park City Mountain Resort. Beautiful hotels, beautiful accommodations, the best world-class restaurants you could want, all surrounded by 18 holes of beautiful mountain golf. Park City Mountain Resort. And did I mention the affordability piece at Canyons Golf? Did I mention that they are, for a 20-minute drive up Parley's Canyon, you're saving money on golf. They're pass holders. When you buy a season pass for golf at Park City, you get monthly events, tournaments, where the prizes are outstanding. They're feeding you, like, not to mention the carts have GPS and they're amazing. Not to mention the on-course food setup. It's just awesome. Save your money, save your heat stroke, and go up to Park City Mountain this weekend and play golf at Canyons Golf in Park City. Let's get your thoughts in here. I'm sure you have many. What are you hoping for? One other interesting point on Big 12 football media days today and tomorrow. Do we get the All-State Big 12 football conference? Do we get I'm very curious. When do we get the naming rights partnership?
Well, I would guess that would be, if we're going to get it during media days, I would guess that would be one of the first things that Brett would roll out in his opening speech, because typically that's how he likes to do business. That sort of opening to the media day on day one is Brett Yormark, giving that speach and
pimping himself out on stage in a beautiful suit.
Yeah, dude's like perfectly dressed, and way in shape and looks amazing. And usually sends a very strong message about where the conference is going. And by the way, I do hope, when that deal comes through, they don't mess the name up. Like, just keep it simple. Let it roll.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. How far up should we go? You guys, great job in the comment section today. Thank you, as always.